Alright nerds, so we're going to talk about the electromagnetic spectrum and what it is. And basically, the electromagnetic spectrum is the entire range of electromagnetic waves, and that's light. Basically, whether it's radio waves, which is one type of light we can't see, or visible waves, which is a type of light we can see. It basically goes in order of increasing frequency, so the frequency gets higher as we go this way, or decreasing wavelength, so the wavelength gets shorter as we move left to right. Now, as wavelength gets smaller, frequency gets higher, and this means there's an inverse relationship. Now, you'll notice down here, as the frequency increases, so does the energy. So as a wavelength gets higher, the energy gets smaller, and as the wavelength gets smaller, the energy of that wave gets higher. Okay, so this inverse relationship, it happens because, remember, the speed of the wave equals the wavelength times the frequency. So, and the speed of all light is constant, whether it's a radio wave or an X-ray. They all run at 300 kilometers per second, all forms of light. So if you've got that, as one increases, the other one has to decrease to maintain that 300,000 kilometers per second. Alright, so here we go. So wavelength, if the wavelength increases this way, the energy decreases this way. If the energy increases that way, the wavelength decreases that way. And again, here are the different types of electromagnetic waves, and we can see this tiny little section just here, so tiny. Alright, so here's the formula. So C, now normally we use V for speed of a wave, but in this case we use C because C is the constant for speed of light, and constant means it doesn't change. So the frequency of a wave is the number of waves to cross a point in a second. This is revision for us. Lambda is the wavelength, which is the distance from crest to crest in meters. So the product of the wavelength always equals the speed of light. So the product of wavelength and frequency always equals speed of light. And the reason this makes sense is that as this one goes up, this one must go down. That's why that relationship happens. Just so that this one here stays at this speed there. Alright, so if we want to calculate the wavelength, first we get the frequency. So what do we know? We know the frequency, okay, and we know the speed of light. What we don't know is the wavelength. So if we use the formula to work out the wavelength, essentially, we go speed of light divided by frequency. That's the wavelength in meters of light emitted of yellow light. Okay, and we've done a little bit of that, and that's mostly revision so that you can see where that relationship happens. Okay, so this is what you need to remember. The higher frequency, the more energy a wave has. So electromagnetic waves don't require a medium, I should say medium, or a media in which to travel or move, and this is why they can travel from the sun to the earth. And they're transverse waves, so they're vibrating electric and magnetic fields at the right angles to them, so the energy is traveling this way, and they vibrate up and down. Alright, so there's the inverse relationship. Wavelengths get smaller, frequencies get higher. Alright, you don't need to write from here on in. You just need to listen. We're going to go through this in class in a bit of detail. So we've got radio waves. These are the longest. We're going to go from longest wavelength to the shortest, or lowest energy to the highest energy, lowest frequency to the highest frequency. So we've got radio waves. They go from kilometers to millimeters, and they're useful in radar, cooking food, so microwaves, satellite transmissions, etc. Then we have heat waves or infrared waves, and short wavelength and higher frequency. And we can use them for night vision. You can use them to detect anything that's giving off heat, basically. And that we see in TV remotes. Visible light, that's what we see, and we've seen where it runs. Now, visible light, it goes from red to violet. and we'll get to how to remember those in a minute. It's pretty straightforward. But we see visible light. What we can't see is we can't see infrared light. What can see infrared light is cameras. And to show this to you, we'll do this. So this is a standard remote. If I press a button, I can't see the light going on, but the camera can. So if I start pressing the button here, trying to turn the volume up on the computer, and it's like, this doesn't work, your tool, it's a different machine. But what you can see is you can see the light going off. Now, that's because the camera has a sensor for different types of light. We only sense infrared light, visible light. Okay, so visible light, that's the part of the electromagnetic spectrum we can see. There's such a small part. Now, the order is Roy G. Biv, and that's the name of the leprechaun that lives at the end of the rainbow. Hence, you see, boom, rainbow. And it's red, orange, yellow, blue, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, violet. And there used to be an indigo in there, but we don't worry about indigo anymore, because essentially, it just means blue. So it's the same thing. Ultraviolet, which is, beyond, so it says a smaller wavelength, is called ultraviolet though, because it is a higher frequency and a higher energy. So we can't see in this. These are the ones that cause skin cancer, and that's because the UV, they've got enough energy that they can penetrate our skin. However, some insects see in the UV light. I should have mentioned that snakes can see infrared. In fact, snakes see in infrared. They don't see in what we would call the visible light spectrum. But bees and insects in general can see UV light, which is pretty cool. And it's to do with the size of the eye cells, basically. So we actually use use UV skin to produce UV light to produce vitamin D, but too much can cause all sorts of problems. And we can use it to sterilize, basically because it kills bacteria. So if you ever see if you ever see stainless steel equipment under a UV light, it's usually being put there to sterilize it. X-rays, they're the next ones down. These are really small, and they've got a lot of energy, and they can penetrate through most things, but tend to be stopped by really dense materials like bones and metal. And we can use them to look at solid structures in the body. Gamma rays have the most energy, and consequently the shortest wavelength, and they get down to the picometer, or trillionth of a meter. They have enough energy to go through most materials easily, and you need I don't know why that's in feet, you need a meter thick concrete wall to stop them, or, I don't know, 30 centimeters of lead, thereabouts. And we use them for nuclear power plants. They're emitted by bombs, and some naturally occurring elements, and they can be used to treat cancers because they are very destructive, so they can be used to kill clumps of cells. Alright, now this is what we call a scintigram, and basically it shows an asthmatic person's lung where the air is getting to, and you can see this area here in the lungs when, that's where the air is getting to as it comes in. It's not going out where it should be. We can say it's because they've placed a gamma radiation emitter in a gas, and they breathe it in, and it's a very short time that it's radioactive, therefore it's a very short time it's dangerous, and it just shows where the air moves around the lungs. Alright, so I hope that didn't get too dense at the end, and yeah, we'll see you in class.